Hi, I'm Aron from 2H Media. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between raster and vector image files. Now, this is something that comes up a lot for us, especially when asking clients for vector versions of their logos. If you're working with an agency or freelancer and they ask you for a vector version of your logo, you might not know what they're talking about. Now, if you're just looking for a fast answer to provide your designer, the first place you want to look is file type. Some common raster file types include JPG, PNG, and GIF. Some common vector file types include SVG, EPS, AI, and PDF. One thing to watch out for is sometimes a vector file can really just contain a raster version of your logo, so you may send your designer a vector version and they fire back that it's actually a raster. That can't be avoided, but the first place to look is at the file type. If you send a JPG, a PNG, or a GIF, you're guaranteed that's not going to be a vector. If you send one of the other file types we mentioned, you've got a much better chance of sending the designer what they're actually looking for. If that's all you're looking for, feel free to tune out here, but if you want to delve a little bit deeper into what the difference between a vector and a raster actually is, stay tuned because we're going to delve into those details. In order to understand the difference between a raster and a vector, you have to understand that we're talking about two very fundamentally different things. A raster image is probably what you're more familiar with. It's made up of a series of pixels all stacked in rows and columns to create an image. A vector, on the other hand, consists of a series of points with lines and fills bridging between them to create complete shapes. Let's actually take a look at what I'm talking about on a computer screen to really showcase the difference. In Adobe Illustrator, I've gone ahead and created two squares. Now, at first glance, these squares look almost identical, but the way they're constructed is fundamentally different. The square on the left represents a raster image, and it's created of a series of stacked blocks. There's 16 blocks in total stacked together to make up this square. The square on the right is a proper vector, consisting of 4 points, 4 lines connecting them, and a fill color making up the body of the vector. In the simplest terms, that's your primary difference. A raster is a collection of blocks stacked together. A vector is a series of points and lines combined with fills. Taking this conversation a step further though, let's take a look at why the difference between rasters and vectors is so important. Imagine we wanted to draw a line diagonally down our square to separate it into two distinct colored sections. With a raster image, we can only create this line by changing the color of the individual pixels. With a vector, we simply create a new line between two of our points and change the fill color used in each section of our shape. Right away, you should see that the vector gives us significantly more fine-tuned control over our final appearance. The more complex we make our images, the more you're going to notice the difference between a raster and a vector. Take for example this pair of gradients. With the raster example on the left, we're stacking different colored pixels to give the appearance of a gradient. With the vector example on the right, we're actually just telling our computer to fill our vector shape with the chosen gradient. If we shrink down our images very small, the individual pixels become harder to see, and the raster image may seem just as good as the vector. But the larger we scale our image, the more we're going to see the difference between the quality in that raster compared to our vector image. This brings us back to the start of our conversation and why your designer is asking you for a vector version of your logo rather than a raster. Suppose you wanted to display your logo somewhere very large like a billboard. We could go ahead and blow up a raster version of your logo, but you're going to start to see those ugly pixels clustered around the edges of your shapes. The more you scale a raster, the worse it's going to look, because your computer effectively has to guess at which pixels to use to fill in the extra space. With a vector image, however, we can scale the image seamlessly forever because all we're doing is increasing the value of our line lengths between our points. In addition to improved scalability, a vector also displays curves with a lot more detail than a raster. In order to add curves to a raster, I have to add individual pixels to give the appearance of a curve. With my vector, on the other hand, I can simply change the slope of the lines between my points to create whatever shape I like. Really, all of this is just to demonstrate my initial point that rasters and vectors are fundamentally different things. Where a raster is a series of stacked up pixels, a vector is a mathematical relationship between lines and points which allows us to create virtual shapes. So there you have it. If you followed along with this entire video, you should now have an idea of what kind of file type to look for when your designer asks you for a vector, and have a better understanding of why that vector file is so important in the first place.